Hello, everyone, and welcome to Debate the News True Crime. I'm Joseph Lobosco, joined by Adrienne Barker. Tonight, we're diving into a case that shocked the nation and upended a quiet college town, the Idaho College Murders. In November of 2022, four University of Idaho students were brutally stabbed to death in an off-campus home. It's a case that has everything: a baffling crime with no immediate suspect, a community living in fear, and an eventual arrest that left everyone stunned. The suspect, it turns out, was a criminology PhD student. This tragedy has raised tough questions about safety on campus, the power of modern forensic technology, and the intense media spotlight that can surround cases like this. Buckle up, because this story is as chilling as it is consequential.
Joseph, I am buckled in for this horrible ride. I am Adrienne Barker. This case truly reads like a horror movie come to life. Four young friends went out for a typical Saturday night in a college town, and by the next morning, they all passed. Victims of a heinous attack in their own home. For weeks, nobody knew who could have committed such a savage crime. Rumors ran wild on social media, and every stranger in town became a possible suspect in the public's eyes. The university, the local police, they were all inundated with tips and criticism alike. And when the arrest finally came 7 long weeks later, the public was astonished. The man charged? Brian Koberger, 28-year-old doctoral student in criminology at a nearby university.
A quick note before we continue: tonight's episode involves discussion of extremely violent crimes, including graphic details of murder, which some listeners may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised. If you or someone you know needs support, help may be available via the Crisis Lifeline by dialing 988. Please remember, Adrienne and I are not law enforcement officers, attorneys, or forensic experts. We do our best to research every case thoroughly, but this show is recorded live with little to no editing. Any factual inaccuracies are unintentional. And of course, any individuals we discuss who haven't been convicted of a crime are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. The opinions of our guests and audience members are their own and don't necessarily reflect the views of myself, Adrienne, or Debate the News.
Okay, so our goal tonight is to present the facts of this case respectfully. We want to honor the memories of Kaylee, Madison, Xana, and Ethan, four young lives cut tragically short, while also examining how the investigation unfolded and what makes this case so significant. We're going to stick to verified information drawn from official records and credible reports. And we will be careful to distinguish between confirmed facts and the speculation or theories that have swirled around. First, we're going to walk you through the detailed timeline of events from that awful November night through the latest developments in the legal case. Then we're going to pose some discussion questions to explore the broader issues raised, justice, investigative techniques, and the community response. And finally, we're going to wrap up with our thoughts of what we could take away from this case. We are live on Chatter Social. You can join us if you're listening to the podcast. Just download the Chatter Social app. You'll see it. It's got some blue bubbles. Download it and join us in Debate the News True Crime.
Our timeline starts on Saturday, November 12th, 2022. It was the weekend before Thanksgiving break in Moscow, Idaho. At an off-campus rental home on King Road, six housemates were wrapping up their Saturday night. Kaylee Goncalves and Madison Mogan, inseparable best friends since childhood, spent the night out at the Corner Club bar and a local food truck, returning home by around 2 a.m. Xana Kernodle and her boyfriend Ethan Chapin had attended a fraternity party that evening. They too came back to Xana's second-floor room in the King Road house shortly before 2 a.m. Two other roommates, identified in police reports as DM, Dylan Mortensen, and BF, Bethany Funk, also lived at the house. Bethany was asleep in the first-floor bedroom, and Dylan was in a room on the second floor. By 4 a.m. on Sunday, all occupants of the home were in for the night, and mostly were likely asleep.
At about 4 a.m., Xana Kernodle received a DoorDash delivery at the house. Shortly after, an intruder, later identified as Brian Koberger, a PhD student from a nearby university, entered the home through a sliding glass door in the kitchen, which led to the second floor. Based on our reconstruction of events, aided by the police documents, the credible media reports, and phone records, here is how we believe the rest of that night unfolded. Koberger bypassed the first floor, went upstairs to the third floor around 4:04 a.m. There, he attacked Madison and Kaylee in Kaylee's bedroom. The two young women likely never had a chance to fight back. They were found later lying together in Kaylee's bed.
Both had sustained severe stab wounds. Autopsy findings would reveal that Maddie and Kaylee each suffered fatal knife wounds to vital organs. Kaylee in particular had more than 20 stab wounds. Madison had defensive wounds, suggesting she perhaps awoke and tried to fend off the attacker's blows. After killing the two women upstairs, the assailant crept back down to the second floor. Xana Kernodle was still awake in her room. Phone records later showed Xana was active on the TikTok app at approximately 4:12 a.m. Around that same time, Dylan was awakened by what sounded like Kaylee playing with her dog upstairs, followed by a muffled voice. Dylan thought she heard Kaylee say something to the effect of, quote, "There's someone here." Moments later, around 4:15 a.m., she heard noises that sounded like crying, followed by a male voice saying, quote, "It's okay, I'm going to help you," in a weird, unfriendly tone. It's chilling to imagine, but investigators believe this may have been the killer speaking to Xana, perhaps to quiet her as he launched his attack.
At approximately 4:17 a.m., a security camera at a neighboring residence, 50 feet from Xana's window, picked up distorted sounds of voices, or a whimper, a loud thud, a dog barking repeatedly. And in the same window of time, Koberger was stabbing Xana and Ethan. And the scene in Xana's bedroom bore signs of a violent struggle. And Xana, she fought hard for her life. She had deep defensive wounds on her hands, and blood evidence in the room indicated an intense struggle had occurred. And according to responding officers, in total, so hard to read, Xana suffered over 50 stab wounds. And Ethan, who had been sleeping over in Xana's room, he was also attacked and fatally stabbed, possibly as he woke to the chaos. And by the end of the onslaught, Joseph, all four students, they had been brutally murdered in the span of roughly 15 to 20 minutes.
As the murderer moved to leave the house, Dylan opened her door and came face to face with a nightmare. A figure clad in black clothing and a mask holding something near his midsection. He passed within feet of her. Dylan later described him as a male, about 5'10" or taller, athletically built, with noticeable bushy eyebrows. She stood in frozen shock, petrified, as the stranger headed towards the kitchen sliding glass door. It was later determined that this masked intruder was the killer exiting the scene at approximately 4:20 a.m. In fact, surveillance footage from the neighborhood shows a white Hyundai Elantra speeding away from the area at about 4:20 a.m., which aligns with Dylan's accounts of the timing of his escape.
In the immediate moments after the killer left, Dylan did not call 911. The two surviving roommates did not contact police for several hours. This delay would later become a point of intense public curiosity and debate. And based on subsequent interviews and recovered phone records, it appears that Dylan was in a state of shock and fear, unsure if what she had seen was even real. In the minutes after 4:20 a.m., as silence fell over the house, Dylan and Bethany exchanged anxious text messages. Just put yourself in their shoes, you guys, how horrible this had to be for them.
Absolutely, Adrienne. When Dylan couldn't reach Kaylee, Maddie, Xana, or even by phone, her panic grew. "No one is answering," Dylan texted Bethany between 4:22 and 4:24 a.m. "I'm really confused right now," she wrote. Then messaged Kaylee directly, "Kaylee, what's going on?" In another text to Bethany, Dylan said she saw someone in like a ski mask, to which an incredulous Bethany replied, "STFU," thinking it had to be a prank. But Dylan insisted, "I'm not kidding, ... I'm so freaked out right now." Bethany urged her, "Come to my room, run." Now, just to put it in perspective again, Bethany's room is on the first floor, Dylan's room is on the second floor. So Dylan is just saw that individual, and she's meters away from the crime scene of her two friends in the next room. She just hasn't seen them yet. So she runs down to the first floor, and they stay in that bedroom for the evening.
Yeah, neither roommate called police at that time, possibly out of fear of drawing the intruder's attention. They're probably confused about what was happening or just hoped that it was somehow a misunderstanding. It wasn't until late the next morning around noon that the alarm was truly raised. The house at 1122 King Road was unnaturally quiet that Sunday. And the victims, they all failed to respond to the calls and texts. And Dylan and Bethany, they became concerned that one of the roommates upstairs might be passed out and not waking up. They summoned a few friends over to help, and those friends arrived, and they arrived quickly, and everyone could sense something was terribly wrong. At 11:58 a.m., a 911 call was finally placed from one of the surviving roommates' phones, and the caller requested help for an unconscious person. Police later said. Responders were dispatched, and what officers found upon arrival was beyond anything they could ever imagine.
Moscow police officers arrived at the house shortly after the 11:58 a.m. call. The kitchen sliding door, the suspected entry and exit point, was found slightly ajar. Inside, blood was everywhere. Officers quickly located the four victims, who were in different locations on the second and third floors. In the third floor bedroom, they found Kaylee and Madison in bed. Kaylee was in Madison's room, according to reports. On the second floor, in Xana's room, they found Xana and Ethan. The responding officers described an incredibly disturbing scene. Multiple stab wounds on each victim, massive blood loss, and no signs of life. In fact, some of the victims were so badly wounded and covered in blood that at first the responders couldn't discern each individual injury. One officer's report noted that at least one of the victims' faces appeared unrecognizable. Paramedics who arrived could do nothing but confirm the obvious. All four students were unfortunately deceased. Investigators swiftly secured the crime scene, and the murder investigation was officially underway.
Over the next hours and days, crime scene technicians meticulously documented and collected evidence from the home. On the third floor, near Maddie and Kaylee, police discovered a tan leather knife sheath lying on the bed next to Mogan's body. And the sheath had a USMC, so that's for the Marine Corps, insignia and a snap button. This sheath would turn out to be the single most crucial piece of evidence in the case. And on the second floor, they noted a latent shoe print just outside Dylan's bedroom door. It was detected, by the way, with luminol and amino black stain. The print had a distinct diamond patterned sole consistent with Van's sneakers, matching the path the intruder likely took as he exited. Detectives also noted the house showed no signs of a forced entry.
All other physical evidence, blood swabs, fingerprints, hair fibers, was collected for lab analysis. Autopsies on the victims were completed by the Latah County coroner within days, confirming that all four students died of multiple sharp force injuries, stab wounds, and ruling the manner of death as homicide. The coroner also noted that the murder weapon was a quote, single-edged, not serrated, and very sharp, used with significant force, details consistent with a K-bar style knife.
In the initial weeks, the police had no named suspect and appealed to the public for tips. The brutal nature of the crime and the lack of an immediate arrest was fueling fear and rampant speculation in the community. Investigators, however, they were piecing together crucial clues behind the scenes. So they had the knife sheath, and by late December, results from the Idaho State Lab indicated a single male source of DNA had been found on the sheath's snap button. Detectives also poured over hours of surveillance footage from the area. And within days, they honed in on the sighting of a white Hyundai Elantra seen driving repeatedly near King Road around the time of the murders. This car also became a critical lead. And on November 25th, Mossville police alerted regional law enforcement to be on the lookout for a white Hyundai Elantra 2011 to the 2013 model years. And on November 29, A WSU campus police officer in Pullman, Washington, which is just across the state line, spotted such a car in a parking lot. And it was a 2015 white Hyundai Elantra, Pennsylvania plates, registered to Brian Kohlberger, a 28-year-old criminology PhD student at Washington State University, who we're talking about tonight. Kohlberger lived in Pullman, only about 10 miles from Moscow. This discovery put him on the investigators' radar.
Digging into Koberger's background quietly, police learned intriguing facts. He had applied for an internship at a local police department earlier that fall, writing in an essay that he wanted to help rural law enforcement agencies better collect and analyze technological data in public safety operations, according to court documents. He was academically focused on criminal psychology and had even conducted a survey about the emotions of criminals posted on Reddit. He posed the survey to understand, quote, how emotions and psychological traits influence decision making when committing a crime. More pertinently, by analyzing Koberger's cell phone records, investigators found that his phone had pinged cell towers near the King Road house at least 12 times in the months before the murders. All but one of those times was late at night or the early morning hours. Then, FBI agents tracked Koberger as he drove cross country with his father from Washington back to the family's home in Pennsylvania for winter break. In fact, on December 15, 2022, while Koberger was en route to Pennsylvania, passing through Indiana, police pulled him over twice for minor traffic violations, but let him go with warnings.
So, meanwhile, the DNA from the knife sheath was used in a genetic genealogy trace. Investigators obtained trash from Kohlberger's parents' home in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, and they sent it for lab testing. The results were the smoking gun. DNA from the trash matched the profile of the father of whoever left DNA on the knife sheath. In other words, it was extremely likely that the DNA on that sheath belonged to Brian Kohlberger.
In the early hours of December 30th, 2022, a SWAT team descended on the Koberger family home in Pennsylvania. Brian Koberger was arrested and taken into custody on an Idaho warrant for 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary. Within days, Koberger was extradited back to Idaho to face charges. Investigators interrogated him briefly. When asked about the Moscow homicides, he claimed he had received a university alert about the incident but knew few details, and quickly invoked his right to an attorney, ending the interview. Forensic technicians collected swabs of Koberger's DNA, which would later be definitively matched to the DNA on the knife sheath. They also seized dark clothing and size 13 shoes from him, items potentially matching the footprint and the eyewitness description of the intruder.
Kohlberger was held without bail, and the case against him quietly grew as both prosecutors and the defense prepared for a trial. At a May 2023 arraignment, Kohlberger stood silent, prompting the judge to enter a default not guilty plea on his behalf. The court imposed a gag order on the case, and by late 2024, the judge granted a change of venue due to massive pretrial publicity, moving the anticipated trial from rural Latah County to Boise, Idaho. A trial date was set for fall of 2024, then pushed to mid 2025 as both sides filed motions, including unsuccessful defense motions to exclude certain DNA evidence and remove the death penalty as a sentencing option.
Then, in a stunning turn, Brian Koberger agreed to a plea deal in the summer of 2025, avoiding a trial altogether. On June 30th, 2025, Koberger signed a plea agreement, and on July 2nd, 2025, he appeared in court to formally plead guilty to all charges: 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary. In a tense change of plea hearing, Judge Stephen Hippler asked Koberger to confirm his actions. Did he, quote-unquote, kill and murder Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernodle, Ethan Chapin? Koberger, staring straight ahead, responded yes to each name. The judge then asked how he pled to each count of murder, again naming each victim. Koberger quickly said guilty 4 times, 1 for each murder charge, displaying what observers described as a flat, emotionless effect. By pleading guilty, Koberger spared himself the possibility of a death sentence. Under the plea deal, Koberger was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole, one for each life he took. An additional 10-year sentence for burglar was added, but it was largely symbolic given the life terms. Notably, Koberger also waived his right to appeal as part of the agreement.
At the formal sentencing hearing on July 23rd, 2025, just a short time ago, the courtroom was filled with the emotion and the anguish of those left behind. And family members of each victim finally had the chance to address the killer directly with victim impact statements. And their words were searing. Kaylee's older sister, Olivia, she said, "My sister Kaylee and her best friend Maddie were not yours to take. They were not yours to study, to stalk, or to silence. They're everything you could never be: loved, accepted, vibrant, accomplished, brave, and powerful." And Kaylee's mother told Kohlberger that hell will be waiting for him. And Olivia concluded her statements by telling Kohlberger that he had not ambushed them in their sleep. "Kaylee would have kicked your F ass." Olivia's blunt words echo the depth of the family's rage, even as the court redacted profanity in the transcripts. Other family members spoke of stolen birthdays, empty chairs at holidays, and the lifelong trauma inflicted by this man's actions. And in a surprisingly note of grace, Santa's aunt, Kim, said she had forgiven Koberger, telling him, "I can no longer live with hate, and that every time you want to talk and tell me what happened, I'm here, no judgment."
Thank you, Adrienne. Yeah, we watched those victim impact statements live when they aired, and they're quite powerful. Perhaps the most heart-rending statement came from one of the survivors. Dylan Mortensen, the roommate who saw the killer that night, bravely stepped forward to speak in court. Dylan sobbed as she described the psychological scars she now lives with. Quote, debilitating, tsunami-like panic attacks, nights where she wakes up in terror, and a shattered sense of security. Quote, he took away my ability to trust the world around me, end quote, she said of Koberger, detailing how even everyday noises or memories can send her into a panic as her body relives everything over and over again. Her words underscored that while the case may be closed, the survivors and families will carry that trauma forever.
With Koberger now condemned to spend the rest of his life in prison, the criminal case officially concluded. However, questions remain unresolved. And the chief question is why? Throughout the legal process, Koberger never offered an explanation or a motive for the massacre. And investigators found no clear personal connection between him and the victims, no evidence of prior interactions on social media, for instance. The prosecution suggested he acted alone, driven perhaps by dark impulses or personal resentments, but ultimately, the motive remains a mystery. And the actual murder weapon, the K bar knife, was never found. Even after extensive searches, Koberger's plea provided certainty of guilt, but no answers, leaving the families to wonder what twisted rationale led to the horror of that night.
In the aftermath, the University of Idaho and the Moscow community have taken steps to remember the victims and heal. The house at 1122 King Road was demolished in late 2023, a decision made to help dispel the physical reminder of the tragedy. The victims' families have channeled their grief into positive action. The Chapin family started Ethan's Smile Foundation to fund scholarships for local students, and the Goncalves, Mogan, and Carnodal families launched the Made with Kindness Foundation in memory of Kaylee, Maddie, and Xana to support student safety programs. As Moscow's new police chief noted in a statement, quote, from the very beginning, this case was about 4 young lives lost too soon. We never lost sight of that, end quote. Though justice has been served, the impact of these losses will be felt for years to come. That concludes our timeline of the Idaho College murders. Now let's talk about it.
Joseph, it's the craziest thing is it feels like yesterday that it happened. And I think all of us were watching it and it was confusing. So I feel like we're all invested. So we're here live on Chatter, and we really look forward to hearing from each of them and getting your thoughts. So first discussion, Joseph, is to me would be that forensic breakthrough. So what were the most critical forensic clues that led the investigators to identify Brian Koberger? And Joseph, what is that called? Familial DNA? If you could explain that a little bit, I would love that.
Yeah, Adrienne. So the knife sheath was, I think, the most important piece of DNA evidence. They had something called touch DNA, which is different than saliva or other types of DNA, blood DNA, but it was still a potent enough sample that they were able to extract DNA from that sample. And they essentially did a trash pull of Koberger's parents' house. His father lives there. They tested the DNA and they matched the touch DNA on that knife sheath to the family tree of the individual whose DNA they pulled from the home. And they determined that the DNA they pulled from the home was very, very, very likely the father of the person whose touch DNA was on that knife sheath.
So, Joseph, was this from when you do the 23andMe or any of those family testing?
I believe it was something like that. I think law enforcement maintains their own databases, but maybe someone else could speak more to that. I see Angie's hands up.
So, genealogy is definitely common through any type of DNA. Using the genealogy, you can work through the family tree, and that usually leads you to the murderer. In the Golden State Killer's case, it led them to the cousin, which then led them to him, which, if I'm not mistaken, they caught him when he was in his 70s, like 50 years later.
Angie, thank you so much. I love having you here. I I've always wondered, I just have to ask this question. Like, do you think that that would stop someone? Like, would I say to myself, "Oh, maybe I shouldn't like be part of those testing because God forbid I have I know I wouldn't do anything wrong, but God forbid a family member did something and they were traced that way." Like, would that change your, submitting your DNA to any of these companies to get results? I know it's a crazy question, but I have to ask.
So, like, the thing with the genealogy, right? Like, I've never submitted my DNA to these companies because I just felt uncomfortable with, a company popping up on the scene and having my DNA. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it's very strange to me to have like a non-medical company have my DNA. It's like you don't really trust these strangers that are non-medical. Anyway, I don't want to be back to the genealogy. Regardless if you sign something consenting that your DNA not be used for any other purpose except for the genealogy tree or whatever, when the police, when the FBI, when the CIA, when they need something, they're gonna get it. These companies are not gonna deny the police what they want. If a murderer uses, let's say, a Hefty garbage bag, if the police decide to contact the company Hefty and give them a serial number, Hefty's gonna provide them with the like anything they need, the police can get. So if this is gonna help them solve a murder, they're gonna obtain the tools they need to get to bowl guard these companies and get what they need. So who cares that these customers signed a consent saying, "Don't use my DNA for anything other than this purpose." It's a crock of BS. When the police need it, they can get anything they want. So, again, it's really not about the customer. It's about what the police need to solve this case. So that's it. Thank you.
I find it just fascinating. So thank you so much. So let's move on if that's okay with you guys, because there's not much that's been said. So Joseph, you went through, I don't know, 300 PDFs. What did you find anything regarding the motive?
So I did not get through all of it. I skimmed through a lot of it. Mostly the stuff that I noticed was information on the crime scene. There had been a gag order on this case for a long time, meaning even their surviving roommates, the family members couldn't speak about certain information. So we didn't even really know exactly what had happened, other than all four of them had been stabbed to death. So what I uncovered, not what I uncovered, what I read in the documents that were released to the public, it was really shocking, honestly. One of the victims was stabbed over 50 times. One of the victims had been stabbed in the face. Her face was completely unrecognizable. So, the manner in which Brian Koberger went in there and killed these people is what is called overkill, meaning way, way more force and stabbing was used than would ever be necessary to kill someone. And that plays into a lot of speculation about the psychology of this. What was the motive? Was he targeting one victim? Did he know these people? We don't have, as far as I know, any confirmation that he knew them. I do know that the Mad Greek, which was a restaurant that two of the girls worked at, forensic evidence showed that his phone briefly connected to the Wi-Fi for that establishment. Now, that doesn't mean he was there in the establishment. He could have been walking by. We don't know all those details. And his car showed that he made several trips to that house, typically late at night. So it's generally believed that he was at the very least aware of these four victims before he went in and actually killed them, but we don't actually know the motive.
So, right after he was sentenced, there was a lot of news on this here. And I just live like 25 miles from the courthouse. And here's the thing, there is no known motive. Even if there had been a trial, and even if Brian Koberger gave some kind of reason, how do you know he's not telling the truth? Right? You don't know. That dude, in my opinion, will more than likely never, ever give a true motive.
Thank you, Steve. Steve and Martin.
Yeah, so when it comes to motive, none of us will ever probably get an answer unless he does an interview. But from what you've presented tonight and just knowing what narcissists or people who commit crimes kind of generally feel about themselves, a level of superiority or just a general grandiose feeling about their ability to execute power, which an act of murder is the ultimate act of power. There was something you guys were saying about him being a student about the psychology of criminals. And then here we are looking at the psychology of him withholding evidence. And I wonder if there's a parallel to his act that also relates to his field of study, that he felt so superior that he thought his acts of murder, much like other murderers who encrypt or leave clues to be solved, he thought he was contributing to the study of how criminals act. I think that there's something interesting to look at there.
Yeah. No, Steven, you nailed it. You nailed the profile of him. From what we know, he was very high and mighty, felt he was the smartest person in the room. In some of his classes, people were off put by him. They knew him as the guy who's going to raise his hand towards the end of the class and go on some monologue.
I feel like he thinks of himself so highly that he thought he could present such an irregular case that it would be studied. But unfortunately for himself and his piousness, he's actually very generic with what he considers to be the great allusions to what could have been studied about him. This was all about him at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And lots of reports of him making sexist comments. So there was some speculation that he may have been an incel, but based on what we know, his attitude towards women, he also felt that same type of superiority complex, it seems. Mariana.
Yes, I just wanted to chime in on the same thing that Stephen is talking about because it's right on point. And I agree with you, Joseph. He was getting his PhD, and one of the things that he was fixated and studying was the emotions of criminals and people that committed murders, especially. And so, obviously, he wanted to experience it for himself. And I believe that that was not the first time that he committed a crime. I may be wrong, but I feel like it was done so easily and so brutal that it was something that it was before. And also that thing that he had towards women. It was said that he will show up late to class to teachers that were female. If you were his professor and you were female, he will come to class late. But he never showed up late to any of his male professors. And he always had disagreement with women. So one of the girls, Joseph, you mentioned this, there was, you can recognize her face after he killed her. I was thinking, wow, he really hated women, you know. And I don't know why her. I think that he was more brutal with her. I don't know if he targeted her specifically, but it was something about her that he just went all in, like all force on her. It was also said that he always had a disagreement. He always wanted to be right, and he always wanted to be the smartest person in the room.
The act of stabbing someone in the face, especially the woman, being able to be recognized by your facial features is a very important characteristics of the human experience. To deny only the woman of that in her death, I agree with you that this is somebody who is very much an act of a coward who hated women. And I just want to emphasize how basic and routine he is, that he is not an exceptional case in the field of murder studies.
Stephen, thank you. That actually goes to the point that if you're listening to us, you really should go and watch the victim statements, the impact statements, very, very hard. And yes, you will cry through them, but some of the family were able to say that, like, you're not as smart as you thought you were. Um, does anyone want to continue with a motive or any thoughts with that?
Another crucial thing to notice about him, and this is very psychopathic in my opinion, is that he washes his hands a lot, like obsessively. He like spends hours in the shower and washes his hands like several times a day. Almost like he wants to clean himself from the crimes that he had committed because he feels dirty. It's sickening because, yeah, you want to wash it off, but you can't deny that you did it. And when you look into his eyes, it's pure evil. It's pure evil. It's like no emotion, and you can see the devil through his eyes.
You're right. No soul. There's not a soul there. Lovely lyrical. Hi, lyrical. It's great to have you here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everybody. So I was just thinking, I had raised my hand, but I just wanted to speak what Mariana had said. The washing the hand things, I think that's more of an OCD thing, just I'm guessing. Only because she was saying like that he would want to wash the murders off his hands. On the contrary, I feel like he doesn't because he does not regret it. He does not have any remorse. So I don't feel like that would be why he is washing his hands. This is just my opinion. But I also am germophobic, slash OCD, and I wash my hands all the time. So that's the only reason why I would automatically assume that. But I just kind of feel like I don't think that he would do that because I don't think he's sorry that he did this. I don't think he has any feeling. Like just watching him. I watched this very closely when it happened. I was on YouTube for hours watching everything that came out about it, and wasn't there something about he was in the car with his dad and the police pulled him over and he had that really scared look on his face and he was freaking out? Is that right?
Yeah, that was during his cross-country road trip that he took with his father to go back to Pennsylvania after he left the University of Washington, and he got pulled over twice during that trip. And they think that those traffic stops may have spooked him because when they went to arrest him, he had been wearing gloves and was separating, allegedly, his trash from the rest of the family members' trash. And they observed him putting his trash, seemingly the trash that he separated with his DNA, into a neighbor's garbage bin in one of the nights before. So I think those two traffic stops definitely spooked him.
So I have a little update. This is really, really interesting. So, digital forensic experts analyzed the cell phone of Brian Koberger, and what they found is they drew similarities between him and the fictional main character of the book and movie American Psycho. Remember the narcissistic banker Patrick Bateman? They discovered that he had spent Christmas night, a month after the slaying, reading dozens of articles about serial killers. And so Heather Barnett, the senior director of forensics research with a company called Cellbrite, she says, I watched American Psycho back in the day and how vain he was, where he would always take like naked photos of himself flexing, similar to that with just pants or topless from the waist up, flexing himself. So, in essence, this article that I'm just reading right now really ties into what you guys are saying about being narcissistic and strange.
It was actually his favorite movie. Did you know that? American Psycho was his favorite movie. So that says it all, right? So he probably watched that movie, I don't know, a million times, and he was studying the movie. How can American Psycho be your favorite movie?
And here in American Psycho, Mariana, by no means was he really smart the way he did this. So one of his key mistakes was that he downloaded some of the websites that he was reading serial killers online. So instead of reading them, he actually downloaded them, which obviously led to a trail for them to analyze. So I thought that was really interesting. Steve.
This is what I personally believe. I believe that he is a psychopath with borderline narcissistic personality disorder. The reason I believe that is if you watched him in court, that dude was like a zombie. I agree with Steven that if I had to spin my dime store psychology based upon my work and background, his motive was, I want to be into the annuals of Ted Bundy, Son of Sam, whoever. And the training he had through his criminology work, which did include crime scene forensics, I believe gave him confidence to do what he did. Do I also believe that there's underlying motives, like people were talking about, like, why are you going to stab a girl in the face 50 times? Yeah, that's a whole different thing versus I'm just going to be a serial killer, right? So, what he did here in Idaho really rocked a lot of people because Idaho has such a low crime rate, and stuff like that just doesn't really happen here. I'm not saying violent crime never happens, but that type of crime is very, very rare.
Thank you, Steve. I just want to say one thing. So prior to his arrest, after reading the news report about how the police had identified a white Hyundai Elantra as a suspect vehicle in the students' murders, he appeared to panic. So his phone shows that he searched auto detailers and also for a replacement car. So very interesting. Also spent a lot of time streaming videos on YouTube and TikTok.
I have to do a deep dive into him, but the fact that he was studying forensic psychology or criminal psychology, I don't know. It just sounds weird to me that somebody who has this background would just do this type of crime and not really cover his tracks, especially if he was studying all these other serial killers and he wanted to be a copycat. It just doesn't make sense to me. But that's it. Thank you.
Angie, thank you. This has been such a great conversation, but I do believe in like good and evil. And I think that something I'd like to think a guardian angel, someone good had him leave the sheath, like karma in the world, however you look at it. I also want to let you know the victims' families have filed a lawsuit over crime scene photos. The families of Madison and Ethan, two of the four college students, filed a lawsuit against the city of Moscow, Idaho. You know what? They reached a point by the time of sentencing that they felt they had some closure and they were able to start to move on somehow. And then all of this ugliness ended up getting released again. So my heart goes out to them.
Absolutely. So I just wanted to bring up something that's kind of it's a really far out there type of theory, but Mariana, you mentioned that American Psycho was his favorite movie. I had not heard that actually. But something that I noticed when I was going through the police documents and some of his purchase history. And I'm just going to preface this with saying that this is honestly something that I just stood out to me. I'm not trying to sensationalize this case or try to get clickbait for the podcast. This is just something that I observed. I noticed that he purchased a black balaclava, which is essentially like a ski mask, which is what witness testimony said he was wearing during the murders. He purchased that on January 10th. And that date stood out to me because I was like, okay, what movie came out that week? And the movie Scream came out 2 days after he purchased that black ski mask. So January 10th would have been peak marketing for that film. So then I looked at when he bought the knife. He bought the K-bar knife and the knife sheath in late March of 2022. That is when the movie Scream was released for rental. So it's a far out there theory. It's probably a complete coincidence, but I thought that was interesting, especially considering that the K-bar knife purchased to a casual person who's not aware of knives and the different types, it looks visually almost exactly like the knife that the killer in the Scream movies uses. In Scream, they use a buck knife. This was not the same type of thing, but visually, if you didn't know the difference, they look very similar. Also, him being clad all in black with the ski mask, targeting college students, plus the amount of overkill and the brutality of the actual murders just stuck out to me as having a lot of parallels to the Scream movies. So that's a conspiracy theory. It's probably unrelated, but I did just want to throw that out there.
Holy hell, Joseph. Holy hell. So first of all, I watched Scream to think oh no, 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 my head can't wrap into that one. No, because then it's very scary.
This whole case in and of itself is really just disturbing to me from start to finish. And, one of the theories that I had heard that he had a crush on one of the girls and she somehow rejected him. And that was one of the theories that I did hear being passed around. But for me, either he was a psychopath or he really did have a crush on one of them because the crime was so brutal, and they say that people that commit a crime like that in the manner that he did it, there's emotions involved in that. So, I'm kinda just baffled by the whole thing and just trying to figure out, like, what was his motive? Did he have a crush on one of them? Was he a psychopath? But again, they say that the way and the manner in which it went down was more like a crime of passion. So, my heart goes out to the families, and I really think that the fact that he took a plea deal kinda cheated them out of the full justice of him suffering, not suffering because well, anyway. I really think he should have gotten the death penalty. I really do think he should have gotten the death penalty, and I don't think that that should have been taken off the table because what he did was just completely heinous, and oh gosh, this case just really, really irks me to my nerves, all the way down to my bones.
See, Debbie, that's why I wanted you to speak. He's a freaking monster, Debbie. He's a freaking monster. He's not human. And we have to remember that. And that's how I can sleep at night. This guy is so sick. But you may have a child going off to college and you may be thinking, what about the campus safety measures? What does that look like? And oh, I do see Steve, so he may want to add something. So, Steve, take it away. And then whatever you don't add, I'll share.
Yeah, so there's been nothing in the news here that's notable that they've changed any security protocols. Like, without a motive, it's really hard to do a threat assessment on the totality of the situation. So I think that's part of the problem. I'm sure some things will change. Like, hey, parents, tell your kids, lock your doors, right? So, all these questions that we're talking about revolve around a motive. But here's the thing that I would say. He did get the death penalty. Now, it's not the death penalty that we think of. Here in Idaho, you have the firing squad. But that dude's never getting out of prison, ever. And I would be highly surprised if he was able to live out his sentence of life. I don't think that's going to happen. Just saying, based on what I know happens in prison when people hurt kids. So
Thank you, Steve. It's interesting, but I think a lot of time it's a catch-22, right? If you share what you're doing with updated security, you're admitting that you had security issues in the beginning, right? So I think that maybe that's why it's not all over the news. But what I did find out is that the University of Idaho spent over 1.2 million on expenses related to the murder. So 475,000 was given on increasing campus security and private guards. So maybe the kids will see more of that. 324,000 went to security consultants. That'll be another conversation, Steve, but that seems pretty high if you compare it to the 475,000 that they actually did use. The home security, nearly 100,000 on security for the home where the students were murdered. That's interesting. I don't know how I feel. That's a lot of money for one home. If the reason is other kids are going to go in there and they're scared, then I can understand that. So increased personnel and patrols. So they are hiring more trained campus safety personnel. Enhanced access control. Definitely locking the doors is like one of the most simple things. But a lot of times what people do is even when you say lock the doors or mom, dad, I'm going to lock the doors every night, I promise. And then one of the roommates says, you know what? Leave the door open. I forgot my key. I just realized I don't have it. I'm not coming home till 4 o'clock. Just leave it open, right? Like like these security breaches are just everywhere. So, and then of course, implementing safety and security technology that they're working on. A big one is improving lighting and visibility. And by the way, we're not just talking about the university. As I said, if you've got students that are going back into university, you guys make sure as a parent, you could drive around, you could see what maybe is not a well-lit area and guide your child to always be safe, stay by areas where there is a lot of lights. Make sure that they have any kind of tools that you have through secure mobile apps. I think that having self-defense and education courses make a lot of sense, especially for women. I see nothing wrong with that. So there are some things taking place. We usually, Steve, after we do a true crime, we kind of look at like what are some of the things that can be done, right? And I know, Joseph, there were tulips with I think Ethan Smiles. I know the community really got together.
Yes, Ethan Smile is a foundation that his family started. They are selling a tulip bulb assortment because in the summers, Ethan worked at like a nursery, like a plant nursery. So I purchased those earlier this week. We will put in the show notes the links to Ethan Smile Charity. We'll also put a link to the Made with Kindness Foundation that the families of Kaylee, Maddie, and Xana started, which supports student safety programs. We will plug all of that in the show notes.
That is beautiful. And we're going to close it out.
I just want to respond to what Steve said. It's like being from New York City, you're taught street smarts from such a young age. I'm talking about, I remember 3 to 4 years old being on the train, or people call it subway, whatever it is you want to call it, and my mom teaching me certain things. You know what I'm saying? And this is how I grew up. When you grow up with street smarts from such a young age, you understand, like, although you see that there's great in this world, you're aware that you're so vulnerable, that these things can happen to you, and you need to constantly be aware of your surroundings. You are not so quick to trust people. You are just pretty much like on point. You know what I mean? Like, and it's true, like, I'll see tourists come to the city and just, like, go all the way to the edge of the platform and stick their neck down the tunnel looking for the train. Anybody could come behind you and push you. Or, just cell phone in the back pocket, just facing the public, sitting on the train with their back fully turned, bag open, just like, and this is how a lot of people really, like, operate, and it's not wrong. It's just that some people may have grown up in neighborhoods where they leave the door unlocked overnight, or they just weren't taught. Or maybe they grew up where they think that everybody has a horse in their yard and everybody this. So, if you ask me, who was taught from a very young age how to not be made a victim, basically, I don't think it psychologically effed me up. at all. I think that it set me up to where I could survive no matter where I go. And I think that one of the biggest gifts you can probably give your kids or people is to teach them these street smarts. It doesn't matter whether you go to LA and you see palm trees or whether you're in the suburbs or the nicest areas. You need to be on point. And I don't know what the answer is, but yeah, I think people shouldn't sleep on these kinds of things. I think they need to watch out for themselves. And I'm glad that I was raised the way I was because and I'm not saying I'm better than anybody else and shit. When tourists come, I always tap them on the shoulder, move back. You see that yellow line? Don't pass that. Have your back against the wall. Do this or do that. I try to help people out. And then, oh my God, thank you so much. You know what I mean? So I just think each one teach one. And that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, Angie, those are good points. I'm from the East Coast, so I definitely know what you're talking about. But what is so sad about this is it was almost seemed like a running joke as I'm reading through some of the testimony that like nothing happens in Moscow, Idaho. Like it's kind of a quiet town, it's a college town, but like nothing like that ever happens there. So at the same time, I understand why maybe they left the door unlocked. Like they're teenagers in college, they're out partying. Like I definitely can see how that could happen. But absolutely, we all need to be aware of our surroundings and stay on top of things. And something as simple as locking your door could be the difference between being the victim of a crime or not. So, really important to keep that in mind. So, thank you. So, the story of the Idaho College murders is one of unimaginable loss, but also of perseverance, of investigators who pursued justice, of a community that came together in a time of sorrow, and families who tirelessly refused to let their children's memories be forgotten. They pushed for answers, they pushed for justice, and they have gotten that, at least in the form of a life conviction without parole in Koberger. In the end, the killer was unmasked and held accountable, but not before leaving a trail of trauma that will take a lifetime to heal. As we conclude tonight's episode, we remember Kayleen Calvez, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, four vibrant young people who had so much ahead of them. Their lives were cut short in an act of horrific, senseless violence, but their legacies live on. Through scholarships like Ethan's Smile and safety initiatives in the names of Kaylee, Maddie, and Xana, their families are ensuring that something positive rises from the devastation.
This case has also left us with important lessons. It highlighted the power of forensic science, how a tiny, tiny speck of DNA on a sheath and a pattern on a shoe print helped unravel an enigma. It showed the complexities of trauma as we emphasize with the surviving roommates and we emphasize with what they've endured in those dark hours and our thoughts and prayers for the family left behind. And it forced us to confront the uncomfortable truth that sometimes, and this is so hard for all of us, so I know you all will understand this, sometimes we may never fully understand why a person commits such evil. But if you think like me, you're just going to call him an evil, non human, disgusting monster. And I could sleep at night knowing it's a monster. As Moscow's police chief reflected, this tragedy was always about those four beautiful lives lost. And in respecting that, the investigators and this part, Joseph, they never lost sight of the mission to bring justice. So we would like to just do a quick shout out to all of those that had worked on this case and being so diligent and just remembering those that lost their lives.
Absolutely, Adrienne. Our hearts go out to the families and friends who will always mourn Kaylee, Madison, Xana, and Ethan, and to the community of Moscow, which has shown remarkable strength and unity in the face of fear. You have demonstrated that light can indeed emerge from the darkest of times.
Thank you for joining us on this in depth journey through a difficult case. Let me just do a few shout outs, Joseph. And if it's okay, we're going to add your first name to the show notes. So we've got Steve, first time here, and we are looking forward to your coming back Tuesdays and Thursdays, 7 p.m. is when we start recording, and we usually go about an hour. Debbie, thank you so much for being here. Mariana, thank you so much. You are Miss 99.9%. Electric Jiggy, we're happy that you're here. Angie, thank you for speaking. I love you. Carlos, thank you for being here. Marcella, thank you. I want to have a conversation about this with you because I feel like I need a little in depth for all you do. And Tammy, wonderful to have you here from Canada. So thank you for this journey. Debate the News True Crime will return next time, which will be Thursday, with another case and another conversation. Until then, stay safe, take care of one another. Please share the podcast. Come on to the Chatter Social app. Download it now. So Thursday, you can come and join us. Okay. We really want you here. And for everyone, the podcast has launched, and we just want to make sure that you listen to every episode. Listen to how I mess up all the words and listen to me cry like the big baby I am. Thank you all and have a great night.
All right, that is a wrap. Thank you everyone for participating. And Thursday, we have Angie as a guest host. We love her. We're doing the Foxhole Farm Murders. It's a crazy case, so you do not want to miss that.
Yes, I need everybody to pull up Thursday. Trust me, you're not gonna want to miss it.